When it comes to climate science, it's not a unique problem in that people who are concerned about it or conversely who think that there's nothing to be concerned about. It's not surprising that most people don't actually understand very much about what's going on. They don't know the difference between the ozone hole and climate change. They don't have good sources for getting comprehensive and comprehensible information about that. When we get a conflict between what the science is perceived to be saying and other things that people hold dear, their politics, their ethics, their community, their religion, people want to reject the science before they reject all of these other things, which are obviously much more deeply embedded. There's a real danger when a science becomes politicized, that politics becomes scientized. Okay, that's a word that Daniel Sarowitz came up with. But it's a recognition that politicians start to use scientific themes in order to further political goals, right? And they use scientific words. They pretend that it's related to the actual scientific enterprise, but it's a sham. It's got nothing to do with real science. Real science takes the information that there is and tries to come up with the best explanation for what's going on. I see the lessons from the Ozone Treaty as being very positive. Science noticed a problem. It saw that CFCs were building up in the atmosphere, that meant that they were going to get into the stratosphere, that meant that they were going to start to deplete ozone when certain chemical reactions started to happen. And the scientists mobilized. People talked about a lot of things. The first kinds of approaches were pretty ineffectual. Let's stop using spray cans. That was great, but it didn't really change very much. The first treaties that were written were to change the growth rate from this to this. The second treaty went to that. The third treaty there, and it was only the fourth treaty that they even had it going down, right? And so I think it took them 5 goes to get to the point where they said, oh, you know what, we can actually ban these chemicals and we can actually move forward in reducing the number of ozone depleting substances. And there's a lot of things that we can do, including energy efficiency and improved mileage standards that have, as we've said before, lots of benefits that are incidental to the climate change issue. Nobody calls me up anymore from a point of any kind of authority and says, hey, is that global warming thing, is that a real problem or not? They're asking me questions about, if we were going to incorporate black carbon into a regulatory mechanism associated with carbon dioxide, how might we do that, right? And that's where the science that brings all these things together can actually be useful to policymakers. A lot of the problem that we have in developing climate policy is that it's perceived to be something different from other kinds of policy. It's sometimes perceived to be something that only exists when we're absolutely certain about everything, which doesn't apply to any other policy. The key, I think, to moving forward is to actually focus on things that can be done and focusing on how they might be done. Historically, we've dealt with environmental issues on a piecemeal basis. We've dealt with acid rain, we've dealt with dirty rivers, we've dealt with oil spills, and we haven't really thought about it in a very holistic way. Part of that was because we didn't have the science that really let us do that, right? It's only been in the last, say, 5 years that the big modeling groups have really got together with the people that care about air pollution or the people that care about public health and have started to put these things together in a coherent, holistic way so that you can ask more interesting questions. And it turns out that those questions are the questions that policymakers have probably been asking all along, and we've been only giving them partial answers. We can see kind of where we need to go, but people are kind of talking about where we're going to park at the end of a 3,000-mile road trip, when we're not even heading in the right direction. You know, we're on the road to Maine when we should be on the road to San Francisco. And that just seems to me to be such a misplaced set of discussions, when really all we need to be talking about right now is turning the car around and heading in the right direction and worrying about where we're going to get to when we get there. It's not going to be solved in one administration. It's not going to be solved by one bill. It's not going to be solved because one senator changes his minds on X, Y, or Z. You know, all of these things are going to change, if they're going to change, you know, slowly, surely, and it's going to take us many, many goes to get this right. The number of people who are trying to muddy the waters is actually very small. The number of scientists and people who know much better than that is very large. And if every one of those people went and did, you know, one public thing, whether it was talking to a school or giving an interview or writing a blog post, we'd completely swamp the forces of confusion.